Hi, Vinita.
Hello, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you. I just wanted to check my
Yes, ma'am.
presentation.
Yes, ma'am. You
Uh,
can, ma'am. You can check now.
I can do it. One
Yes,
second.
ma'am.
Share. You have to enable the screen sharing for me.
Yes, ma'am. I'll do. Just a second, ma'am. I'll request
Yeah.
Preeti, ma'am, to make you a co-host so
Mm,
that you won't have any problem in sharing.
mm.
Ma'am, you can check your PPT, ma'am. Usha, madam.
I should share entire screen, isn't it, to show all the tabs?
Ma'am, you can check your PPT, ma'am. Usha, ma'am.
Okay, let me check. Uh, no,
I think you have to share a window. Share a window.
share a window. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you able to see the other windows?
Wait, it will come, I think. It's coming. Hasn't yet come.
No, then I should check.
You go to share screen
Okay.
and you have to
Or should I share the Chrome tab?
Chrome tab will be sharing online. Do you have a PPT?
Yes, I have a PPT.
Okay, just WhatsApp it to me. I'll share.
Okay.
Or you just when you just have to say share a screen, share a window.
Share a
Chrome
window.
tab. You have to say share a window.
Okay, now let me see. Uh, okay. Okay, I will.
I've made you co-host. It says that you are sharing. No, you know what? You have to keep your screen open. Have you done that? You first open your PPT.
And it leads to global warming because this environmental worldwide environmentalists they are fighting on global warming.
Hi, Usha. Okay. But you're in office, right? Did you come back? No. Oh. No. We'll put some filler in, and we maybe you can send your PPT to me. Hmm. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Welcome back, dear participants. For the next session, we have with us Dr. Usha Alagappan.
Just a moment, Vinita.
Yes,
Dr.
ma'am.
Usha doesn't have internet.
Yes, ma'am.
So we are asking Anuja to come in earlier.
Fine, ma'am.
Anuja, you can come in earlier because Usha's internet is down. Can you? Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, 5 to 10 minutes. Yes. I'll be looking at the screen when you enter. Yeah. Just text me. Okay. Yeah. Maybe Vinita, you can play the song "Keep in Your Dream in Your Pocket." You can
Yes, ma'am.
play the song.
Keep a dream in your pocket and a song in your heart. Keep the lamp of your learning burning bright. Keep your eye on your horizon and a smile on your face as you travel down the highway of your life. Don't listen to those voices that say it can't be done. They build walls where there was never one before. No, there's nothing that can stop you, nothing that can drag you down. If you keep looking for that ever-open door. So if you follow your dream to the end of the road, taking care not to let it fade away. Not fade away. If you follow your dream and you follow it well, it will lead you to the promise of a bright, shiny day. Well, imagine if Columbus had not dreamt the world was round, and Armstrong had not walked upon the moon. If John and Paul never wrote a song for yesterday, if all of them had given up too soon. Yes, they were always taking chances, looking for the answers that took the whole world to higher ground. So if you follow your dream to the end of the road, taking care not to let it fade away. If you follow your dream and you follow it well, it will lead you to the promise of a bright, shiny day. Keep a dream in your pocket. Keep a dream in your heart. Keep your dream forever. Don't let it fade away. Keep a dream in your pocket. Keep a dream in your heart. Forever. Don't let it fade away. Follow your dream. Taking care not to let it fade away. Yes, if you follow your dream and you follow it well, it will lead you to the promise of a bright, shiny day. Follow your dream to the end of the road, taking care not to let it fade. Don't let it fade away. Follow your dream and you follow it well, it will lead you to the promise of a bright, shiny day. Follow your dream to the end of the
Yes, Vinita.
Ma'am, who's doing the next session?
Anuja.
Anuja, yes. We we'll have a Usha ma'am session after
Yes.
the lunch, the afternoon.
Yeah.
We have with us Ms. Anuja Sundar, who is an ardent student of language and literature. She has worked as a learning material developer, English teacher and coach, and Japanese language teacher, and is currently pursuing her PhD program in English at Presidency College, Chennai, under the guideship of Dr. V. Shivaraman. Her current thesis builds on her master's and MPhil research work in the area of Japanese literature and translation. In her free time, she enjoys reading, writing poetry, and dreaming about her next linguistic pursuit. As we know, integrity without knowledge is weak and useless, and knowledge without integrity is dangerous and dreadful. I now request Ms. Anuja Sundar to share her views on research ethics.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of the staff, the professors in charge of this event for thinking of me and for including me in today's activities. It's very interesting for me to talk about research ethics, especially as I am actually doing research. So I will be sharing a PowerPoint for my parts of the presentation. So I'm just going to take a minute to do that. Do let me know if it's visible to everybody, ma'am.
It's visible, ma'am, it's fine.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Could you have your video on?
I'm actually kind of having some issues with my camera, so I'm sorry about that, ma'am. I'd like to, I usually do, but
that's no problem.
Kind of issue. Thank you so much, ma'am. So I was asked to talk about research ethics. And initially it was supposed to be a post-lunch program. So I had a little story to start with. But I guess a story is always nice. Even if you haven't just had lunch and feel sleepy, I will still start with the story. So my story is actually going to start with talking about research in a very broad perspective. And to talk about research in a very broad perspective, what I'm going to do is take a little story about meerkats. This is actually a science research, really, but I just wanted to share this because I felt it's something very relatable to all of us as humans. And we don't need to think about research in little pockets, like that literature is separate from science or that humanities need to be segregated. Research is the same in most fields, although methodologies differ. So I'm going to just talk about meerkats really briefly. So meerkats are actually a family of monkeys. So they look like this, basically, and they live in several parts of Africa. And they live in gangs. They are very cooperative and social creatures. And I'm going to talk about something that meerkats do that's very interesting for us to observe. Now, meerkats are foragers. When it comes to hunting for food, they have to go out and actually look for food and gather it. And usually their food is in the form of insects or bugs or worms. So this is what meerkats look like when they're burrowing around looking for food. This actually, unfortunately, they're usually present in a lot of desert spaces. So it leaves them very vulnerable, very open to attack. Birds have a very easy time picking them off as prey. They're not very large creatures. So they become extremely vulnerable. But what's really interesting about meerkats is that they have this very special feature in their societies. I'm sorry, I think somebody has their mic on.
Just a moment.
Thank you, ma'am.
Stuck.
Can you mute yours, please? How do I mute all? I want to mute all.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So what's really interesting is that meerkats have this one particular member And it's not a designated member, they just keep rotating. So one particular meerkat decides to take on this role, and it's a completely voluntary action. When they're all out foraging, one meerkat will step aside and is considered what is called a sentinel. And they stand in this position, which is called the raised guarding position. They stand on their hind legs, even though they're usually on all four. Stand on their hind legs, and they climb up a particularly noticeable location, like a rock. They go up a rock and they look around. They act basically as watchmen for their entire gang. They look out for predators that might be looking for them as prey. And what they do is when they do see a predator approaching, they let out a particular bark, which is very special, that tells the other meerkat that there's a predator coming. And so all of them know, okay, they're busy burrowing, and now because of this bark, they know they can look up and they have to go and hide. But otherwise, they can just focus on looking for food instead of constantly getting up and looking around, oh my God, is somebody coming after me? So the sentinel takes care of that for them. And this is a very interesting behavior observed in meerkat. So for many, many years, scientists thought this particular behavior of meerkat, performing the sentinel role, is very altruistic. By altruistic, the traditional definition is you do something without thinking of yourself. It's selfless. You put yourself in danger for the sake of other people. You somehow lose something for the benefit of other people. So scientists thought for a long time that these sentinels among meerkat were altruistic. But what happened later? Well, scientists finally decided to ask an important question. What's really happening here? Because it doesn't make sense, does it? I mean, self-protection, self-preservation is a very natural instinct for a lot of animals. It doesn't make sense that they should go out and put themselves in danger, that they should make themselves an open target for their predators on purpose at their own expense in order to protect others in their group. It doesn't make sense in terms of evolution. Because evolution, as we know, the theory tries to basically says that over time, anything that doesn't help you protect yourself is weeded out. So why are these meerkat doing this? What's really going on? And what happened was later these studies came out. They started observing the meerkat a bit more closely. You can see how open this meerkat is. It's on sentinel duty, and it's so obvious a bird is going to have an easy time picking it off as prey, right? So what's the deal? Some later studies came out that said that actually these sentinels are quite safe and in fact might even be selfish. Apparently, these studies, after observing these meerkat for quite a while, I'm talking 2,000 hours or so, they watched them for so many days, and they saw that these sentinels were actually able to get to safe locations after seeing a predator much faster than the meerkat who were doing the foraging. So what it turned out to be was that the sentinels never got in danger. They always got away. As soon as they saw the predator, they ran, they shouted to everybody, and then they ran for their own safety. And they were always safe. They were never harmed. They were never actually putting themselves in any danger. So what we have is this new ideology that these meerkats were not altruistic. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. They might even be selfish. Being a sentinel guarantees your safety better than being a forager. But then scientists started asking more questions. Like, why would a meerkat bother being a sentinel at all? Why not just run for safety? Why do you want to take that extra effort of standing up on the rock and shouting to the others? You can just, save your own skin in the first place. Don't even put yourself out there. Why does it do that? So further research went on to discover that there is something cooperative in what the meerkat were doing. Yes, they were safe, but they were taking the effort to inform their buddies that a bad guy's coming, which makes them, yes, not altruistic, but not selfish either. It's something deeper than that. To be honest, scientists still don't have an answer about sentinel behavior in meerkat. So I can't give you a clean answer now. when I have one. But I wanted to share this story to you as an illustration of how research works. So what's happening here? What is research? Well, it began with these scientists examining a phenomenon critically. They started asking questions. What's happening? Why is it happening? Why are the meerkat doing this? And they started introducing new angles, right? What if it's doing it for something else? What if there's some other motive behind this? They questioned accepted beliefs. It's all well and good that we want to think that meerkat are altruistic. We want to believe that animals or humans have this amazing quality of giving themselves up for the sake of others. But evolution has told us that this may not be the case. So we need to deeply question what we are accepting and start looking at the gaps, trying to think more critically about what we're observing. So that is basically research. And then, of course, there's the question of why we research. So what's the point of it all? What does it matter to me if meerkat, do this sentinel behavior or not? I'm not going to gain anything. Well, that's somebody else's research. But each of our own independent research tasks is basically for one of two things. One, we want to broaden a perspective. We want people to look at more than they have been looking at. We want people to consider other possibilities. For example, when translation studies, for example, in a field that's probably very close to a lot of us here, when translation studies first came around, they were actually a subset of linguistics. Because in early translation studies, what these researchers were focused on was basically comparing the linguistics of one text and the other text, the translation versus the original. We were looking at word for word fidelity and so on. But over time, translation studies came out of this little pigeonhole of linguistics and looked at broader concerns, right? There's also cultural aspects. We have to think about the source text's context, where is it coming from, and the target context. Where is it going to? Do we want to package it so that people in this new country can accept what's being said in this text? Or do we want to give them the closest thing to the original so they know something new? So translation studies has really taken into account all of these fundamental questions about research, about translation, coming beyond just linguistics. The other point of research is to deepen our understanding of what we already know, which is the meerkat is a great example of that. And we know the meerkat do this. We know they exhibit this behavior. What we don't know is why. So the more we investigate, the better we understand. In literature, a good example is how we have gone from basic textual analysis to contextual analysis. We don't look at, when we say Shakespeare, we don't look at only one of his texts anymore. We don't look at only what's there in the text. We think about performance. We think about the Elizabethan age. We think about the stage, how it existed at that time, and how that had an effect on what he wrote and how he wrote it and what he presented and all of that. So we've really deepened our understanding of Shakespeare by looking at a lot more than what we used to. So research is what has led us to do all these things. Research has basically improved us as a species. It's made us think more. And often what research is doing is elaborating what we already know or subverting it. Excellent examples of subversion include feminism, or eco-criticism, or Orientalism, which eventually paved the way for post-colonialism. All of these told us to look at the world differently, to consider what's happening around us, even if just by a little bit differently than we've always done. So that's what research is and why we do it. But how do we actually do the research? Who tells us these things? Well, I'm going to simplify this. You may even consider it an oversimplification, but I think Dr. Anwar did a wonderful job telling you all the technicalities of research. So I'm not going into the nitty-gritty. I'm going to talk about the basics. Because what's a really good idea when you feel lost in research is to take a step back and think about what you're doing and how you're doing it, and answer these really broad questions, and that'll help you arrive at the narrow ones. Dr. Maria Preeti also addressed some of these things already. So again, I'm not going to go too deep into it. But basically, research starts with observation. Usually it's something personal, because in our experience, we pick up something. We see, hey, why is that happening? I'm sure, the meerkat sentinel behavior was observed by a guy who was just watching them and thinking, what's this meerkat doing, standing on that rock while the others are on the ground searching for food? It starts with something as simple as that. Why is this author writing this? And why is it so different from what or her has been writing for years? Which brings us immediately to the next stage. We ask questions about what we're observing. We wonder. You can't stop at accepting what's happening. Okay, meerkats do this. No, why do meerkats do that? What's the objective? What are they trying to get at? What does it mean in the larger scheme of evolution of species on Earth? And it even ties into humans at one point. So ask questions. Read. You've read an entire author's oeuvre. You've read all of their works, and something stands out for you. Why? What's different about that work? What is he or she saying that's different from what you've read before? And then you begin research. You search for answers. And I think this is very fundamental to research, is you start with the body of existing knowledge. And this is what eventually becomes your literary review. And I'm talking about this as a very natural process. I'm not talking about it as a research framework. This is just how we go about doing things. As children too, this is how we went about doing things. We saw what was happening. We asked our parents questions who we thought were more informed than us, searched for answers in whatever way we knew. And you can do one of a few things at that point. You can accept the answers that you were given, or you can find issue. So that's your role as a researcher, right? Finding issue with the answers that you find. Either you have unresolved questions, something doesn't add up, you're not happy. There are inadequate answers. It doesn't address all the problems completely. There are gaps in knowledge. Someone hasn't spoken about something. That's where research really comes in. And at this point, I'm going to diverge from what research is and go into the ethics of it, which is basically the morality involved in how we go about doing research. And again, I don't want to get really pedantic about this. What I want to do is just think about why we're doing research and what the most logical thing to do in research is. So some really basic ethics. And this is what research basically is. I picked this image because I felt it really summarized. We read a lot, in the area that we're concerned with. We synthesize all that information, and then our output is not only that synthesis, but also the synthesis combined with our ideas. That's your research. The first and foremost thing in good research is to do it justice. I know a lot of us experience a lot of pressure in our careers to do research because you need to have a PhD, or you need to earn more, or whatever it might be. But since you're going to go about it, you might as well do it justice. You might as well do a good job. And when I say do justice, what I mean is to read as much literature as you can on your area. I know it's impossible to read everything. And Maria Preeti Ma'am also mentioned that it often happens that you have this idea and you read and then you realize somebody else has already said it. So then you need to go about asking more questions, thinking about what you can do, what you can contribute, and what hasn't been addressed. And for that, you need to read a lot. I am so sorry. No way about this. This is research. Reading is probably 80% of research, to see what all has been said before. Another important ethic is to address what's been established so far. And when I say this, I make it especially explicit that you cannot leave out what's inconvenient. I'm sure 7 or 8 authors have written about your area, of which you probably agree with 4 or 5 of them, but 2 of them might say something that's very contentious that you don't agree with. but you can't just leave it out. As long as it's relevant to your study, as long as it's talking about your study, you need to address it. You need to say, okay, author 6, author 7, they have talked about this. But what am I saying in response? How am I dealing with that counterpoint? This is very important in research. Until you acknowledge everything that's been done so far, you're not doing the basic fundamentals required for research. There's no point reinventing the wheel, as it were. Nobody starts observing meerkat without understanding what scientists have already said before. Why do you want to say the same things over and over? It's very fundamental, it's very simple. Of course, the next ethic is to support your research with evidence. You can't make empty claims. You can't make sweeping statements without showing evidence. I think, again, Anwar sort of spoke about this, that you cannot have these broad sweeping generalizations without supporting it with what's in your text or whatever it is that you're trying to prove. And this is very important. I think a lot of people may not think about this at an early stage in research, is that when you're writing your arguments, when you're constructing your argument for your thesis, think about potential counter arguments. Yes, you're trying to say a point, but what can people say against it? And this is why we have doctoral committees and meetings, because all of these senior professors and guides can help you understand what others may have to say about what you want to say. What might they go up against? And it's always a good idea to work that into your research. You can admit, you know what, I haven't gotten that far yet. Or you can say, you know, I'm going to address this. Or you can say it's not relevant. But you have to address those concerns, especially which are really obvious. It's always a good idea to have sounding boards, to talk to people as much as you can about your thesis, so you can get other perspectives. Research is all about perspective, and it's probably the most fundamental thing in that sense. Now, probably at the heart of research ethics is plagiarism. And I do want to talk about this. Now, in an age of the internet and everything at our fingertips, especially in COVID, I think there's during this period of staying in our homes, there's been a lot more usage online, a lot more usage of networks, and it's just the world has really shrunk, which also means that while you have sources easily available, it's also just as easy for others to tell when you have copied something. All they have to do is copy paste your thesis or one paragraph online, and they're going to find out if you've copied even just a little bit of it. So it's very, very easy to get caught plagiarizing, even if you did it unintentionally. So a basic definition of plagiarism is that when you use anything by other people without acknowledging them. And by anything, I mean their thoughts, even if they just, randomly muttered a thought, as long as it's their own and it's not yours, and you know that, it's plagiarism. Using their ideas and concepts in their theses, using their language or expressions, using the same words that they do is definitely plagiarism. I'm sure that's the one you're very familiar with. And using their structure. So say they argue about something in one particular way. Even if you copy the structure of that argument, it's a kind of plagiarism. So you need to be very, very careful and move, very strategically around how you cite other people. I will be getting into this in just a little bit. Before that, a brief look at the different types of plagiarism. Now, of course, there's verbatim copy, right? We preserve the characters as they are, copy things word for word, and it becomes verbatim. It's exactly the same thing. This may be obvious to us, but there are other types of plagiarism also. When we copy concepts or structures, idea preserving, right? We retain the idea that somebody else did, but we may change the words a bit. That does not mean it's not plagiarism. It is still plagiarism as long as it wasn't your idea to start with. Paraphrasing. So you may think, okay, the author has said this, I'm just going to rewrite the whole thing in my own words. When you retain the same meanings or ideas, the semantics of it is the same. Again, it's still plagiarism. Synonym substitution might be a very tempting solution, but there's also plagiarism. So you're going to take their words and they just, swap out the words for other synonyms that sound or carry similar meanings. You're still preserving a lot of what was in the original, sometimes even the syntax or the word order. That's still plagiarism. And of course, there's also mosaic or patchwork plagiarism. You might think, taking different ideas and putting them all, synthesizing it into one sentence is okay, which it is fine for many things. I'll show you examples. But the important thing here is that you need to acknowledge when it's not yours. My whole point about all this is not to say that you don't talk about what others have said, but you have to say that others have said it and it's not yours. And that's the important thing. It's not okay to include works you haven't referred in your bibliography. That is a crime too. We might be tempted, we might be told you need to have at least 50 sources. So we might crowd our bibliographies with books we haven't read. That is also not good research ethics. Unintentional omissions. This is probably the most dangerous thing, because unless you fine-comb your thesis, you might miss a few of these. But if you unintentionally, omit some citation, you've quoted it, you've quoted it, but you forget to add those little brackets in that person's name, that is still plagiarism. As long as in the final official document it hasn't been done, it is plagiarism. So please be very, very careful. Now, this is something Anwar said again also mentioned, but there are two ways that we acknowledge what other people have said, two ways that, and we have to follow both. We have our bibliography at the end, where we list all of the texts that we referred, and we have the in-text citation, wherever the quotations or summaries we got from other places are there in our actual thesis, we use the in-text citation. You need to use both, and you need to make sure you've done it very, very thoroughly. This is an image. I want to share the link with all of you. I will be doing that at the end. But I wanted to show you how serious plagiarism really is, and how easy it is to plagiarize without realizing that we're doing it. You see all of that red and all of those little no's? That's how easy it is to plagiarize. You need to check and double check and triple check to make sure you have not omitted acknowledging someone else. So I will share this. I'll be happy to share this, but please do run this check on what you have done in your own work to make sure that you haven't unintentionally plagiarized. Because as I said, it is a crime, and it will completely, render useless all the effort that you put in for years together. So please don't become a victim of that kind of thing. So that's on plagiarism. Now, overcoming the basic issues with plagiarism can be very simple. And it starts with being clear about what others have said, as opposed to what you're trying to say in your thesis. And for that, I have this excellent resource. I would really like everybody to try to get their hands on this and read it if possible. It's a beautiful book. They Say, I Say. And it's basically a very simple, very easy to read introduction to academic writing and how you go about doing academic writing. So if you have the chance, please do read this. I'm going to summarize some of the things they say in this book. And they offer you a very simple formula for academic writing and basic research. And again, as Anwar said, it's basically what others have said before and what you want to say. This is all research really is. This is kind of the summary of it. But it also entering a dialogue. You are not living in a vacuum doing your thesis, and we may feel that way. In fact, sitting in our rooms, typing away or writing away our drafts, it may feel like a very solitary thing. But your voice is actually a part of this big dialogue, this big discourse on whatever you're talking about. So think about how you're talking back. You're not just saying, you're responding. So the very basic of research, when we start, we do our literary review, we acknowledge what's been said. We start with who said it, how others have responded, and how it's relevant to your study. Again, Anwar sir covered all of this, so I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but this is what it is. This is how you start. And finally, you come out with your response. And your research is essentially your contribution to this conversation. this conversation that researchers all around the globe are taking part in. What is your argument? How are you going to establish what you want to say? That's all it really is. It boils down to that in a very basic sense. So I have some very simple tips from, the they say, I say structure of the book that I've just kind of culled out to share with you. So you start by listening or reading, listening to others, reading what they've said, and build this sense of the standard views on your area. What is accepted? Meerkats are altruistic. Meerkats are selfish. What further research has been done? They might not really be all that altruistic. They might not really be all that selfish. And when you come to your study, you start by summarizing the relevant views and acknowledging them. Okay, so, these people have said this, others have said that. This is how this research has built to where I've gotten today. And then you take it forward from there. What are your views? Do you agree? Do you think they're altruistic? Do you think that they're selfish? Or do you partly agree or disagree? You, of course, support your views with evidence. You observe the meerkats, you do some experiments, and you try to find new answers. This is very, very important. At the very end of all this, please remember that your research is your work. Your research is what you want to say. So please be very clear about what you're saying and distinguish it from what others have said. Make sure you're very clear that this is my contribution. This hasn't been done before. That's what I have done here. And that's going to make your study relevant, which is, I think, something very basic. All of us will have to deal with that when we have our PhD viva, where we have to defend our theses and say, what, this is what I've contributed. This is the gap that I addressed. And finally, coming to this last part, some more simple tips on actually writing about what others have said and writing what we say. At the very beginning, I want to address the difference between summary, paraphrase, and quote. So basically, this is actually given in an order of priority too. So more often than not, what you want to do is summarize what others have said, where you take away only their main ideas, their key points, and rewrite it in your own words. That being said, you still have to acknowledge as long as it's somebody else's idea. You would say that, okay, Edward Said said this, or Kate Millett said this, and so on. But you're summarizing it. You don't need to list every little thing that they said, only the parts that are really significant or relevant to your thesis. The next step is to paraphrase. If the summary is insufficient, if you feel it doesn't capture everything that you need, only then do you paraphrase. And paraphrase basically retains all the elements of the original, but again is rewritten in your own words. Even then, you have to cite, you have to quote. It's still someone else's idea. You're just rephrasing it in your own words. Why are you rephrasing it in your own words? Because we should only quote others verbatim when we have no better way, no easier way to say it. Your thesis is your work. Filling it up with the quotes of other people will not help you find yourself in your thesis. At the end of it, you might feel lost. You might not really know what your voice is. So overquoting can be a really big problem. I know we have this prerequisite, okay, you need to write 150 pages or 200 pages, but it needs to be our ideas. That's our contribution. There's this person, John Nash, some of you may be aware, who wrote a thesis. He was an economics student, and his thesis is now very famous, and he won a Nobel Prize for it. His thesis was on game theory. His thesis was only 28 pages long. I'm not saying that your thesis should only be 28 pages long. Poor scholarship, but I'm telling you that sometimes what we say is a lot more concise than we think. Be effective. Use your words carefully. We need to not throw them around or use too many words where a few will do. You quote only when you absolutely cannot think of how better to rephrase something. Summarizing should be the first instinct. Please don't retell stories. This is again something Anuja had already said, that I think sometimes in literature we suffer from this need to tell the story of the novel we're analyzing. But please assume that your reader, the person who has come to your thesis, has already read the primary text. They only come to you for insights, not for the story. Don't retell the story again. He walked, she said, they fought. That's not what we need to do in research. Plots can usually be summed up in a sentence. You may think, oh, I need to give some background information. Oh, I need to give some context. Well, it's enough to finish it in one sentence. For example, Anna Karenina is a fictionalized narrative of a woman's experiences, da-da-da. It's just one sentence. Probably runs 2 or 3 lines. You don't need a paragraph or 3 or 4 pages for that. People can read Anna Karenina on their own for that. What you need to do is analyze. You can elaborate on the relevant parts as you do the analysis. For example, character A's journey into the forest could be said to symbolize. Now, you don't need to tell them, okay, character A went to the forest. You're just working it into your analysis. But what about what critics say? Critic Y's argument about the character's experience being representative of class oppression is not supported by the text. A close reading of the text will show that, and so on. So over here, as you can see, what I've done is try to assimilate the other person's opinion into a statement about your own research, right? You're bringing in and you're showing how it's relevant to your study, expressing your ideas all at the same time. You don't need to waste words for that. It can be done very effectively. And please make sure you describe others' views appropriately. We tend to say X said this, Y said that, but we can use more concise, specific terms. Is he commenting? Is she criticizing? Is she suggesting? Are they overemphasizing something? Are they not accounting for something? Of course, Anuja also mentioned the use of transition, words like although, however, that show contrast and so on. These are extremely helpful. They will help you build your argument and your analysis in such a way that people understand what it is that you're trying to say. What are you bringing new to this field? So I have just one illustration before I kind of wrap it up. And we're going back to the meerkats for this. I'm sorry if it's a lot of biology in one day, but I don't know. Personally, I felt this is more like a little story than biology. And I hope it also encourages you all to think of science that way too. So I'm going to share with you 2 little articles on meerkat sentinels. Here's this first article, which was published by the BBC News in 1999, following a very important study. And the BBC article is titled, Animal Altruism Myth Exposed. I'm just going to read out some of the key points here. Now, in the beginning, the article starts by saying, it kind of contextualizes why they're talking about this. Why some creatures risk their lives for the benefit of others is a puzzle for scientists because it contradicts an animal's instinct for survival, right? So this is establishing why we're looking at meerkats. What's the point? And of course, it's describing meerkat behavior and establishing what people thought of it as. Long held as a prime example of heroic altruism in the animal kingdom. That's what the meerkat was. But this paper is saying it's as selfish as the next beast. So it's completely turning upside down our existing opinion of the meerkat. And then there is evidence, right? It's talking about what the study did, right? And how did it prove that meerkats might actually be selfish? Not one meerkat guard was attacked by a predator in the 2,000 hours of observation. They were also the first to dash into a nearby burrow. They had extra time for saving their own skins. So this is what that study established. Of course, the news article is just talking about a study. They just wanted to show you how this builds an opinion in your eyes about meerkats, right? That's what the article is doing. It's very persuasive. It's telling you meerkats are selfish. Now let's look at one more article. This is by a woman, Emily P. Robinson, and I found it online. And her article is basically, and she's a biologist, are meerkats altruistic? She's looking at it again from one more perspective, and it's a much newer study. As you can see, it's in 2000. But hers, this is not a very. I mean, she didn't do a lot of experimentation, but she's just asking some fundamental questions. So she starts by acknowledging the existing work, right? Bednikov's proposal of the safe selfish sentinel talks about meerkats being very safe, protecting themselves, saving their own skins, and so on. But what is the question that Robinson is asking? If the burrow is the safety zone, why bother sentinel at all? Why bother looking out for the others? That alone tells us that there's something more to this behavior. There's something cooperative. It's not entirely selfish. Another thing is, this particular paper talks about how sentinel behavior, looking at other studies, she's seen that sentinel behavior helped increase the group's chance of survival. So other meerkats survived. Other meerkats would go on to reproduce, and that was beneficial to the sentinel also, the reproduction of the entire group. It also increased foraging success, so more food for everybody. So according to this paper, she concludes by saying they're neither entirely selfish nor altruistic. There are mutual benefits for both the sentinels and the foragers. Now we have these two very radically different articles, but they're both a part of the same discourse. They're both a part of the same research. So when I enter that dialogue, here's just an example of how I might go about it. So let's say, although Bednikov's model of the safe meerkat sentinel, supported by Cletton-Brock's study, offers an explanation of otherwise disadvantageous behavior, right? So we don't know why they're putting themselves at risk. So Bednikov saying they're not actually at risk tells us that, okay, this may be the reason. But this does not warrant labeling the meerkat sentinels as selfish. Studies have shown that both sentinels, as well as their group, benefit from sentinel behavior, suggesting that these mammals are neither selfish nor altruistic, but rather cooperative. And I've cited Robinson here because this is basically from Robinson's paper. And these cooperative behaviors are beneficial to everybody. Now, this is what's already done before. What do I want to say? And that's where I pick up. The study has further investigated. And then you continue. What did I observe in meerkats? What new thing do I have to contribute to this? Can I, do I agree that they're cooperative? Do I feel that they're selfish? What did I find when I looked into this matter for myself and for the entire scientific community? This is just an example of how you synthesize the writing that has come before you and then pave the way forward for what you want to say. So that's all I really wanted to say. So I hope that this kind of gives everybody some additional perspectives on research and how we go about doing research and why it's important to be ethical in how we do research. And when I say ethical, I don't want you to think about it again in a very pedantic way or right and wrong or morality, but rather as something natural to research. It's I would say that plagiarism is antithetical to research as a whole, because research is about new findings. And as long as a new finding is there, then it's research. And of course, you need to back it up with a lot of reading and evidence and all that. But without that new finding, if our work is only what others have said before, then it's not really research at all. So in that sense, more than ethics, I would even say that it's just essentially research has never been about that and should never be about that. It isn't. So at a core definition, we need to think about what we want to say, and that's new. So yeah, that will be all. Thank you all very much for very patiently listening. I'm not sure if there's some session after this or who I'm supposed to turn it over to. So, ma'am?
Yeah, Vinita will take.
Thank you so much.
Maybe there'll be some questions for you also, Anuja.
Oh, okay, sure, ma'am.
Students, you can ask questions to the resource person.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I was supposed to share a particular link. I'd like to do that now. So I'm going to stop the screen share briefly to share the link on plagiarism. There was an image in the PowerPoint. I'll just be putting it up to everyone in the meeting. Please do take a look when you have the time. Thank you, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt.
Students, if you have any questions, you can post it in the chat box. The link is also there in the chat box. A lot of comments coming in appreciating your lecture.
Yes, I'm just saying that. Thank you so much. I have no qualms sharing the PowerPoint, although I didn't feel there was anything really significant in it. I can share a link if you would like. I can just put it up in the chat now if somebody wants to.
Yeah.
Yes, so this is the PowerPoint. Anyone can access that. I've just shared the link. It's just a Google Sheets, Google Slides set. So, but I'm really happy if it was helpful.
Yes. So I don't think there are any questions as such because it was quite clear what you had said.
Thank you.
Anuja, I just want to add to what you said about research helping. Here you spoke about the natural world.
Yes,
I did come across a story of I don't remember the finer details, but it goes like this. It comes on a series called "It's a Miracle." So there was this young woman who lost her boyfriend in an accident.
Okay.
And she did a lot of research on what could have been done to save his life. And she's just a lay person, so she did a lot of reading, and she zeroed in on a certain substance that could have been administered to him. Okay, and well, her boyfriend died, and so she kind of, to come to terms with her grief, she was researching on this. And then she wrote a paper, just random. It was a random paper that she posted on the internet. And the kind of accident that took place to her boyfriend happened to a child in a different place, in a different time zone. And well, the doctors also gave up on this child, but the doctor who was researching on it came across this paper, and he suggested this as the last solution. And well, to sum it all up, this child recovered. The child who was destined to be a paraplegic was on his feet. And in this series, It's a Miracle, they show both people meeting, the person who wrote the research paper and the life she saved through her research paper. So I'm not sure if I articulated it too well, because this is quite distant in my memory. And this is the sum and substance of it, that a research paper saved a life.
That's an excellent example, ma'am. I'm really glad you shared that, because we may think that we're just little voices shouting in the void, but
yeah,
it really need not be so. And there's always someone looking. We underestimate the population of the earth, I think.
Yeah.
As you said, the voice is a part of a greater dialogue.
Yes, exactly.
If there are no questions, I think we can wrap up the session. Anuja, it was a pleasure to listen to you. It was an excellent session, and you have reiterated the need for ethics in research. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you to all of the organizing members for this chance to talk about it on this platform also. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Preeti ma'am, we'll have a lunch break now and
Yes. And
we'll
then
resume at 1:30.
yes. And thank you, Vinita, for marvelously anchoring these two
Thank you,
sessions.
ma'am. Thank you. So we have a lunch break now,
Yeah.
students. We can get back at 1:20, 1:25. We can rejoin. Thank you.